To my viewers far and wide, I have something this morning that we need to look at in more of a enlightened approach. The question has come up in regards towards the truth. What is the truth? Pertaining to fake news, etc., etc., etc. Jesus said that in the last days, many false representations would rise, and a lot of them would say that they themselves are Christ. But the fact of the matter is, Jesus nailed it on the head by saying that in the last days, fake news would become a predominant fact in our society. Now, one must ask the $64,000 question. Just exactly what is fake news? Well, I have ruled out sincerity, because people over in the Middle East that thinks that they can strap a suicide vest on their body and go out and physically harm themselves and harm 150 people or kill them, thinks that they're going to go to heaven, live with Allah, and drink all the wine they want and live with 99 virgins. Those people are sincere in what they believe, but just because you're sincere doesn't mean that you're right or truthful. The people over in India believe in reincarnation, and they refuse to eat any cows that's running around simply like cats or rats or rabbits over here in this area. They're starving to death, but they refuse to eat any of them because they're afraid that they're going to eat Uncle Albert or Aunt Jane. They're sincere. They're very sincere. But is their sincerity truthful? Even in the Bible, it's recorded. I think it was King Augusta maybe, or somebody like that, that after Paul got through preaching to him, he asked, what is the truth? In other words, they couldn't identify the difference between the truth and a lie. A lot of people in today's society wouldn't be able to identify the truth if they was to stumble over it. The truth comes from the heart. And if you don't have a true heart, you're not going to know what the truth is. Now, reality says the truth is whatever the reality is. Is it? You know, whenever Pharaoh turned the two staffs into two snakes, he presented himself as being a grand magician. But then when Moses threw down his staff and ate the two snakes, it also proved that Moses's magic, if you want to call it magic, was greater than Pharaoh's, pertaining to the powers at bay. So people today are struggling with certain things that they should outline, underline, pertaining to the gospel. The reason why the gospel is called the gospel, it's called the gospel because it's the truth. Now, whether or not you want to believe that the King James Version Bible, or those that come through or after, or that is inspired by the King James, whether or not you want to believe that it is the truth or not, that will be up to the individual. But I personally believe that the two hands that come out of heaven in 1983 was the hands that come from a righteous, holy, risen Savior. Not the hands that come from Lucifer, not the hands that come from a demonic spirit or a deranged spirit, but it come from the Holy Spirit that saved my life in 1983 whenever I had an automobile roll over on top of me. I wound up having to have my spleen removed and about 9 units of blood pumped back up into me. It was a divine miracle that happened, which is the very opposite of what Satan and the demonic forces of Satan would do, because the demonic forces of Satan is out to kill, steal, and destroy. Satan is not going to take a part in trying to save somebody's life, because it's not in his DNA, it's not in his character. So whenever you have to use a lot of times common sense approaches whenever you ask these questions about truth. Right now, there's big discussions about this coronavirus of the truth. We need to listen to the experts. But at the same time, we need to tiptoe through this, because there are certain areas that are now being explored towards violating the constitutional rights of individuals. I don't know where that separates pertaining to public health versus the right towards not wanting to take the shot because you either don't like it or you don't understand it or it's against your religious belief. I don't know where the dividing line is right there. It's awful blurry towards where that line is. Or fuzzy, kind of like fuzzy math. You don't really know where that line really is pertaining to somebody's religious belief. Well, I'm not going to take the shot versus public health. So this is an area that we haven't explored into in the 21st century since the major pandemic hit in America and throughout the world pertaining to the Spanish flu. I think it was 1917 whenever that happened, towards an outbreak like this. So we're going through areas that we're having to sift through and understanding what is fair, what is right, what isn't fair, what we should do, what we shouldn't do. The best that I can tell you pertaining to my personal testimony about the coronavirus that is now went into a different variant and possibly could actually go into another different variant before it's over with, is that I went ahead and took the shots, the 2 shots, vaccinating myself from the COVID because of the health issues that was forced upon to me up in Kentucky whenever they basically poisoned me by putting me on a drug called Risperdal that causes obesity. And in my obesity, it caused me to have diabetes, which basically broke down my immune system and my pancreas to the point that now my pancreas is not doing what it's supposed to do towards breaking down the fatty tissues in my body throughout my digestive system. Because I have underlying health issues, I made a conscious choice of going and getting the 2 shots. If I was back where I used to be in my 20s, 30s, and even 40s, as far as being top-notch health-wise, I would debate. I'm not going to lie to you. I would debate in whether or not I should take the shot or was willing to take the shot based around my faith in Christ. Not in Allah, not in Buddha, not in reincarnation, not in the Wiccans, not in something down in Louisiana pertaining to witchcraft and sorcery, but I put my faith in Christ. For Christ said that if you drink of anything deadly, it will not harm you or hurt you. Well, they've harmed me. They've harmed me. And my faith is in Christ. And the way that they've harmed me is by intravenously forcing a drug up into me, or up onto me, up in Kentucky, with this Risperdal that causes obesity issues. So now I'm having to confront the cards that was dealt to me. I'm having to confront them later on in life now since the coronavirus, the pandemic has set in. I wish that they would have not done that. And because they've done that, I feel like God is bringing a punishment upon the society towards, you know what, if you're going to force this upon to the saints, then let's force it upon to the wicked and the demonic. And I tend to wonder if what has gone on with our law enforcement officials here in the United States, not just with my particular case, but in many cases of how that they have unfairly treated some of their citizens. Please listen to Face the Nation this morning as we get further into this issue.
With our senior national correspondent, Mark Strassman, in Marietta, Georgia. Cajun country versus COVID. It's not a fair fight. Louisiana has one of America's lowest vaccination rates. COVID hospitalizations are 8 times higher than they were 5 weeks ago.
People are younger and sicker, and we're intubating and losing people that are my age and younger.
In 2 weeks, 1% of Louisiana's entire population has caught the virus.
We have no reason to believe in our data that we've reached the peak or that we're coming down. We have more children sick with COVID-19 than at any other time during the pandemic.
Across America, 71,000 kids tested positive in the last week of July. 1 in 5 new cases, as the Delta variant stalks the unvaccinated of all ages.
The level of sick visits that we've seen this summer, June, July, and now August, I've never seen in 20 years of practice here in Houston.
Another negative, surging positivity rates. 20 states are over 10%. More alarming, Idaho, Oklahoma, and Mississippi over 40%. 2 states, Texas and Florida, make up nearly 1/3 of America's new COVID cases. Both governors oppose universal masking as schools open.
We can either have a free society or we can have a biomedical security state. And I can tell you, Florida, we're a free state.
Free state, costly approach.
So we have
State.
Free state, costly approach. Free state, costly approach.
So we have basically patients everywhere in both sides of the unit.
On Friday, the state set a daily record, nearly 24,000 new cases. Hospitalizations have quadrupled in a month. Deaths have doubled. Despite the runaway spread, COVID's culture war is unrelenting. More schools open this week. More parents will square off about protecting kids.
Can't mask the kids. It's unconstitutional. It's child abuse, and everybody knows it.
Anti-maskers, anti-vaxxers.
You see, there has to be some sort of a insured evaluation that no matter who you are, no matter how old you are, this is what we must do as a surviving society. I don't know where that dividing line is pertaining to people's rights that's not willing to either mask up or become vaccinated pertaining to this evil demonic force that has been unleashed into society in ways that I never would have imagined in my lifetime. But there's going to have to be some sort of an agreement pertaining to the fuzzy line, pertaining to the misguided issues of where do we stand as a society towards what is fair, what is not fair, and we may actually have to put aside our rights to a certain degree in doing this. And I'm not saying we're going to, I'm just saying we might have to. I'm not saying we're going to. But I weighed it out in my particular case in regards of taking the vaccination shot, in regards to the health issues that had already been forced upon to me by a society up here in Kentucky whenever they tried to put me on Risperdal that they shouldn't have, because the only time that the doctors is supposed to have the initiative of doing this is if their patient is a very violent patient. I have never been violent in not only my occurrences with doctors, but also the interreactions with law enforcement or the interreactions with inmates in prison cells towards being evaluated. I have never been violent. And because of that, they are in jeopardy towards violating my rights up in Kentucky whenever they forced a drug into me after Judge Woodall signed off on it in Trigg County, Kentucky. They are in violation towards violating my rights because now they have damaged my health. They have literally damaged my health to the point that I went from about 225 pounds to 340 to 350 pounds almost practically overnight. Within a period of days, I watched weight gain on top of weight gain on my body that have never been this heavy before. And it was simply because of a drug called Risperdal. If it hasn't been pulled from the shelf, it needs to be pulled from the shelf because of the consequences that it causes in people's lives.
Folks back there have lost their mind. You've lost your minds. You are the ultimate knuckleheads.
The only way to fight against it is we get the shot.
Urgency now drives vaccination campaigns. Right behind the Delta variant lurks the Lambda variant. More employers have a new vaccine policy. Get it or get gone, including Microsoft, Tyson Foods, and United Airlines. Here in Georgia, the number of new daily cases is...
I know this, that blackmail in America is supposed to be against the law. And whenever you go to blackmailing people by giving them ultimatums, hey, if you don't take the shot, you're going to lose your job. Hey, if you don't take the shot, this is what's going to happen. Hey, if you don't take the shot or mask up, these are the problems that are going to occur in your life. I know that blackmailing people, according to the way that I understand the laws of the land, is supposed to be illegal. Supposed to be. But once more, we're dealing with something that is uncommon, it is unusual. And whenever it comes to persuading people of taking the shot by offering them bribes, well, I'll give you $100 if you take the shot. Well, I'll give you $500 if you take the shot. Bribing somebody is another disqualification, according to our laws in our land here in America, that we're not supposed to participate in. And if we do, you're supposed to pay the price of breaking the law, committing a crime by bribing somebody. You know, how many times have we heard a witness pertaining to a trial? Well, he offered her $10,000 to say this or not to say this. Or they done this in favor of that person. That's a bribe. And according to the laws that I understand, to bribe somebody, to get them to do something that ordinarily that they wouldn't do, is supposed to be against the law in America. So these are all sensitive, hairy, fuzzy issues that we're going to have to work through here in America simply because of dealing with something that we haven't dealt with now for over a decade, or actually a century. It's unbelievable how much confusion and mass hysteria out there, especially when it comes to parents having children. It's just unbelievable how much hysteria is out there right now, mass confusion, that as far as I'm concerned, that's another characteristic of Satan's climate. It says in the Bible that Satan is the author of confusion. Okay? And whenever you have all these confused ideals, when you have all these confused theories coming out of the CDC and the doctors' administrations, whenever you have all these confused parents, it creates an atmosphere of confusion. In the atmosphere of confusion, people can get hurt.
At its highest level since late January, before the vaccine was widely available. Hundreds of them in Metro Atlanta are kids. They tested positive during the first week of school. John?
Mark Strassman in Atlanta, thank you. We go now to the Arkansas governor, Asa Hutchinson, who joins us from Little Rock. Good morning, Governor.
Good morning, John. Great to be with you this morning.
It's good to have you. I want to start with schools and masks before we move on to the bigger issue of vaccinations, but they're related because in schools, those under 12 can't get vaccinated. You signed a bill that was against mask mandates. You changed your position. Why?
Well, facts change, and leaders have to adjust to the new facts that you have and the reality of what you have to deal with. Whenever I signed that law, our cases were low. We were hoping that the whole thing was gone in terms of the virus, but it roared back with the Delta variant. And whenever, we're pushing the vaccines out, but those under 12 cannot get vaccinated in the schools. And so I realized that we needed to have more options for our local school districts to protect those children. And so I asked the legislature to redo the law that prohibited those requirements or those options for the school districts to protect the children. And so it was an error to sign that law. I admit that. Thank goodness if the legislature did not act this week, which they didn't, the court stepped in and held that as unconstitutional. And now we have that local flexibility for schools to make their decision to protect the children based upon the unique circumstances of their district.
When you say facts change, do you see something in the last few weeks, particularly with respect to those under 12 who are in hospitals who are getting COVID? Did you see and learn more about the way in which the Delta variant is affecting that specific part of your community?
We have, and part of it is that the Delta variant is so transmissible that it affects every population. The higher age group populations have been vaccinated, so we're seeing 40-year-olds in the hospital and on vents, and then it goes down. And while the children are less susceptible to it and have less at risk, still a small number of children find themselves in the hospital. We've had over 24 in our children's hospital. We've had 3 adolescents die. They couldn't be vaccinated, and so I look at that and I say that we've got to do everything we can to protect those children. Everybody else can be vaccinated and are pushing those vaccinations. We don't need other stringent measures there because vaccine is their solution. But for those under 12, we want them to go to school, and we need to have that flexibility because they do have some risk.
I want to get to the vaccine solution in a moment, but quickly about the Marion School District. I think there are about 900 students and teachers in quarantine. Do you feel like that wouldn't have happened if the school district had had the freedom of local control and the ability to have a mask mandate in that school district?
Well, if we would have had more vaccines out, those numbers would have been less. But it illustrates the point that if we're going to have a successful school year, school districts like Marion need to have that option to require masks for those lower grades or make the decision that's suitable for their community. But let me emphasize a point here that ordinarily you have about 2.5 contacts from one exposure that has to be quarantined. But in the school environment, it was more like 18 to 1. And so that's why we had so many that were quarantined, and you can't have a successful school year with that kind of exposure in the school. And so vaccines, as well as flexibility of the local school district, would be the key in my judgment.
Last time you were on the program, Arkansas was 46th in the nation in terms of first vaccinations. It has now risen to 38th in the nation, so it has gotten better. 60% of Arkansans are now gotten at least one shot. What accounts for that improvement?
Well, 2 things. We did start our community conversations, which are town halls that I've been to over 12 cities, and those honest conversations from skeptics to trusted advisors in the community has spurred action to increase vaccination rates. But even more significantly, the risk factor is at play. And people see the hospitalizations up, they see the cases, they see what happens to their neighbors, they're worried about it, they're going out and getting vaccinated. We want to continue to mount that campaign to engage our local communities. Hopefully we can be successful and continue that increase in our vaccination rate. That's the only way out of it.
Last time you were on, you said if incentives don't work, reality will, and it seems to have kicked in. When you have these conversations in the community, a new Kaiser Foundation poll found that half of those who are unvaccinated say that they're more worried about the vaccine than getting sick. When that comes up in your conversations, what do you say to people?
Well, first of all, it's not what the government says, and I recognize that's not going to be the answer that is needed or is persuasive. but I will call on a local physician that they know, that they trust in their community, and ask, what do you say about that? And that trusted advisor is more persuasive and fact-oriented and helps to dispel the myths. The second thing that's important is the FDA has to act. We've had well over 100 million Americans that are vaccinated. They're not going to come in now and say, well, that shouldn't have been approved. As Dr. Fauci says, they're dotting the I's and crossing the T's. We need that final FDA approval. They need to act.
Do you think if the FDA approves that there would be any vaccine mandates in school districts or that would kick in after that full approval happens?
Not in Arkansas. I don't support a vaccine mandate. We can do it through education, but I do expect that broader acceptance of the vaccine. I do expect that some employers and sensitive industries will require vaccines, but you have to have the FDA approval before that is more broadly accepted.
When you've been going around the state and encountering your constituents, a lot of times in this pandemic, people have said, we're all in this together. But you made a statement this week where you said some politicians are playing to people's fears and not being compassionate. Are we all in this together based on your experience?
Well, we're all in it in terms of trying to get through the pandemic, but we have to have leaders that will step up and say, that's a myth, that's not supported, and you all need to listen rationally to people. We can't just give in to the loudest voice, which is 15% of people who's not going to take the vaccine regardless, that believes in the conspiracy theories that are totally irrational. And we have to have leaders that will be able to resist that loudest voice in the room and talk common sense, compassion, and logic to them.
I'm going to weigh in right here on what he just got through saying. I think the reason why that there is so much confusion, this is just my opinion, it doesn't cost you a thing to hear my opinion, is because Hollywood has warped the minds of people in so much television, so many movies. They consider a good actor if they can put on an act to where it looks like that it's real. That's what they consider a good actor. And if you're not a good actor, odds are you're not going to get any Grammys or Emmys or whatever that they give out at the end of the year. I think people has been inundated with these types of falsehoods to the point that now people literally don't know what to believe. So because they don't know what to believe, they don't believe nobody or nothing. It used to be that you didn't believe but half of what you see and you didn't believe nothing that you hear. Well, now it's gotten to the point that you do both. You don't believe nothing that you hear and you don't believe nothing that you see. Because nowadays they can take the head of Obama and put it on Arnold Schwarzenegger's body and make it look normal. That's the cleverness of TV. That's the cleverness of Hollywood. It has subjected people in an environment of doubt, of unbelief, of disbelief. And because of it, it has caused total chaos here within the land and throughout the planet. Now that you can take to the bank. Confusion, according to the Bible, that Satan is the author of. Satan has developed all these doubting issues and all these different ideologies that now it's becoming entangled with itself, especially since the internet, all these social media platforms has come on board and everybody can chit chat towards putting out their ideal or putting out their message the same way that I'm putting out mine right now. And people are going to have to get down to the bare roots of what they actually believe, of whether or not it's true or false. If the Bible substantiates it, if the Bible can back it up pertaining to what is going on and what somebody is telling you, then maybe it's time to put down your shields and start believing in your belief after the facts has come into the existence of your presence. Right now, that is complicating things even that much more. The COVID virus is mutating. As the virus is mutating, doctors are having to change course in their advice in what we should or should not do as human beings. Because the virus is changing, it's growing, it's evolving, it's causing that much more complications or confusion. Go back to the Bible. Satan's out to kill, steal, or destroy. Go back to the Bible. Satan is the author of confusion. Now you're starting to open up your eyes. So this thing is a plague that has come on to us by the works of the devil, by Satan. And because God has lifted his umbrella of protection pertaining to allowing for it to happen, now it's happening. Now it's happening. There comes a time whenever you figure out that you have bitten the hand that was feeding you, that was bringing you adequate rains, adequate sunshine, adequate health, adequate this, adequate that. It comes a time that you must identify what and who this entity is. If you continue to not appreciate, or you continue to bite the hand that is feeding you these things, it's called a lesson of life, that we are in the middle of the storm right now of looking at and understanding. And it even talks about this in the first 3 chapters of Revelations, for I will throw thee off into a sick bed. What is a sick bed? It's where people are getting sick and they're dying. We're in that sick bed right now. We're in that storm. So biblical Bible prophecy is in fact coming true. Just like Christ said that in the last days, many false witnesses or many false Christs would rise in the last days. Well, that's being justified by fake news. All these myths that's being projected out into society. Jesus foreseen where we was going to be today over 2,000 years ago, and he tried to pre-warn us. He tried to give out advisories in trying to awaken us, enlighten us, to give us a roadmap of saying, this is what's going to happen. Expect these things to occur. For the Bible says that we will see signs in the heavens and signs upon the earth, such as we've never seen before in the last days. We are seeing those things even as I speak. So please, when you watch something like this, do not take this nonchalantly. It is time for not just the American people, but the world to pay very, very close attention to this lesson of life. And what can we do to alter, change the direction of where we stand right now in the middle of this storm?
Finally, Governor, as we go out the door here, you served as chairman on the National Governors Association. The Democratic co-chairman was Andrew Cuomo. When Margaret was here and asked you about it, you said you're going to wait for that investigation to take place in New York. The investigation has taken place. A lot of people think he should step down. Do you have a view?
Well, the investigation was very thorough. The allegations could not be more serious. No woman should have to go to the workplace and have to choose between a paycheck and being assaulted, particularly when it's in a public environment. So he either needs to resign in the face of this. Certainly, if criminal charges are filed, he should resign. It's a sad circumstance, but that was a very credible review, and the allegations are very serious, and that should not be tolerated in a public environment for sure, much less a private environment.
Governor Hutchinson, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
But like most politicians, he never did really truly answer the question of whether or not he needed to resign. Or if he did, he done it in a very, very nonchalant way.
An exclusive interview for CBS This Morning and the Albany Times-Union. National correspondent Jerika Duncan spoke to Brittany Commisso, who is going public for the first time since she was identified as Executive Assistant number 1.
You know, these women's stories that come out, I feel so heartbroken by them, because there's no doubt there's some truth to whatever that went on, that they believe that went on. Why they blow the whistle a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road, I still don't understand that. Maybe they feel inferior, maybe they feel frightened, maybe they feel threatened to the degree that if they speak up right then and there, it's going to cause that much more harm to either them or their families. I don't know. But whenever an occurrence like this takes place, it should be dealt with right then and there on the spot. It shouldn't be something that we pull out of the skeleton drawer 5 years from the time that it actually happened, or a year from the time that it actually happened. It needs to be dealt with appropriately right then and there on the spot. So in a way, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but in a way, what has caused people to question their credibility is how come they waited so long before they went public with their particular situation or their case. I'm not saying that it didn't happen, and in some cases I know that it did. In this particular case, I don't know. And we may not never know until we all get to the white throne judgment and find out, those that want to find out, of whether or not this individual was guilty of doing these things or not. If he is, maybe it's time for him to come clean. A matter of fact, not maybe, but it is time for him to come clean, to be able to save his dignity and the rest of the embarrassment that could be fallen upon to his family and the rest of the professions that's involved in this. It's really sad that these women get jerked around the way that they get jerked around simply because they're a woman.
In the New York Attorney General's devastating report of sexual harassment charges against Governor Andrew Cuomo. In that report, Commisso said she was groped and sexually harassed by the governor, and on Friday filed a criminal complaint against him with the Albany Sheriff's Office. Commisso is one of 11 women accusing the governor of sexual misconduct, and the state assembly is expected to finish an impeachment inquiry later this week. Cuomo denies the allegations and says he will not step down.
Why did you file that criminal complaint with the sheriff's office?
It was the right thing to do. The governor needs to be held accountable.
And just so I'm clear again, being held accountable to you means seeing the governor charged with a crime.
What he did to me was a crime. He broke the law.
You can see more of Jerika's interview tomorrow on CBS This Morning. Face the Nation will be back in 1 minute. Stay with us.
Once more, we live in a society that we have been taught by the upper ranks of Hollywood that in order for you to be a good actor, you have to put on a good show. So it leaves room in doubt when people see stuff like this. Well, maybe she's just acting. Maybe she's just a good pretender. Anybody can stone up and make their eyes get blood red and shed a tear or two and become very, very emotional. Because we see that almost every day coming from Hollywood in different actors that can do that. She may be one of them. Then again, she may be true at heart. The truth will tell. Time will be the healer of all things, according to my grandmother, and eventually this too shall pass.
Yes.
And the fatigue of wearing.
Let's back up. I went too far.
Calls out to many governors.
Back up a little more.
Education Secretary
Sorry
Miguel
about
Cardona.
that.
He joins us from Marion, Connecticut. Good morning, Mr. Secretary. I want to jump right in. The governors of Texas and Florida have enacted measures to forbid mask mandates. You said you were going to talk to them. Have you talked to them? Or if you haven't, when you do, what will you say?
Good morning, John. Yes, we are ready. 50 million students across the country are ready to return to school in person. We owe it to our students to safely reopen schools and make sure they have the best opportunity for learning, which we know as educators is in person. And yes, it's an all hands on deck effort. I have calls out to many governors, including Governor Hutchinson, which we just heard from. And I did talk to Governor Abbott, and I spoke to the commissioner in Florida. We need to work together to make sure our schools are safe for all students and for our staff.
You make any progress in those phone calls?
You know, I think what we're seeing across the country is we recognize the importance of vaccinations, and the president put a charge on all of us. Let's get our vaccination pop-up clinics set up in our schools where students feel comfortable going to get it. And I think everyone across the country agrees on that. I believe strongly that we need to do everything, including our mitigation strategies, to make sure our students are safe. The data is showing us that in places where they're not following those mitigation strategies, we're putting students at risk. We can't accept that.
You said in a briefing this week that governors in those states of Texas and Florida are putting politics, they're letting politics interfere. Do you see no merit, though, to their argument that basically the school experience is impinged by wearing a mask?
Listen, I understand the fatigue of wearing masks. I don't like wearing masks. I know my own children don't want to wear masks. They are vaccinated, but we also understand that this is bigger than us. We're trying to keep infection rates low.
Maybe we need to change the concept of changing the mask. Has anybody ever thought about that? Instead of just having a regular surgical mask, like that little girl right there is wearing right there. I guess it's a little girl, it may be a boy, but looks like a girl. But instead of the concept, and to be quite frank with you, I don't like wearing a mask because I wear glasses, and a lot of times the mask will cause the glasses to fog up. I realize that they got anti-fogger out there that you can spray on your glasses to keep them from fogging, but once more, that's another element that you got to deal with. People don't want to have to deal with this stuff. So I feel like that if they was to change the concept of the mask, some way or another, I'm sure it would cost a little more money, but maybe you could get just one mask and stick with that one mask for a certain period of time, and maybe have cartridges on the mask that you change out every 6 months, kind of like a painter's mask that they used to wear with the kind with the big fluffy things on each side, to where the cartridges get changed out every so often. To wear a proper mask and to wear it right, you're not supposed to have any hair on your face, number one. Number two, it's supposed to be fitted to your face, that particular mask, and it has to be certified through OSHA of being a proper form of resistance, regardless whether it's chemicals or it's bugs pertaining to the COVID disease, the virus. Maybe people need to concentrate on changing out the masks to where the mask won't have such of a tendency of fogging up people that wears glasses, number one. Number two, make it to where the masks are more comfortable and they're more efficient in fighting off what needs to be fought off. Has anybody ever thought about doing that? You know, there should be all kinds of little mama pop-up factories popping up with people that has this same ingenuity that wants to better society this way. Not for profiteering reasons, but for the need at hand that we're all having to deal with right now. I see people wearing masks in other parts of the country that are not your typical mask. And from the look and the design of the mask, it looks like it would be more effective and it would be more comfortable in probably all the above in the designer of that particular mask. Just to wear a surgical mask, it's good to a certain degree, probably 80-85%, but it leaves room for that 10 or 15% that is debatable on whether or not it's really doing any good to wear the mask. And I'm just going to use this concept real quick for an illustration. If you look right here, and she don't have no hair on her face. If you look right here, there's actually an opening from here to about right there. There's a gaping hole right there that can come through, air can come through there. Well, if air can come through there, so can germs, so can chemicals. It can go through there. Now up in here, it looks pretty neat. Up in here, it looks pretty good. It looks like she got it around her nose real well. Down in here, around her neck right here, it looks pretty tight. So this up here and this down here looks good, okay? But from here to there, there's a void. And because of it, it makes this mask not 100% foolproof because it is not fitting her face properly. And how many times have we seen people out there walking around that was using the mask basically for a chin brawl, and I'm guilty of that too myself, towards pulling the mask down and not using it appropriately. I've actually worn mine on top of my head before, just to get it out of the way, but still claim that I'm wearing a mask. Well, it don't do no good to claim to wear a mask if you're not efficient in wearing the mask. If you're not going to be efficient in wearing the mask, it almost has a tendency of saying, well, you probably be better off just not wearing a mask at all. Once more, these are my opinions. These are how that I am consuming this information that we're all dealing with the struggles of life, keeping safety always at the forefront of trying to prevent more sickness and more death of occurring.
And I think it's more dangerous for students to be home and have interrupted learning because of the decisions that we're making. We're clearly at a fork in the road in this country. You're either going to help students be in school in person and keep them safe, or the decisions you make are going to hurt students. That's where we are right now. And while I understand the argument around not wanting to wear masks because we're fatigued, without question, student safety and staff safety come first.
And your argument, as I take it, is that if you don't allow some flexibility, or if you don't have masks in schools, you're going to see interruptions. I mean, there's a quarter of the country in which there are these blockages on mask mandates. Do you expect in that quarter of the country you could have schooling actually fully interrupted?
I do believe that. I mean, the segment before, 18 students in a classroom had to be quarantined because masks weren't being used and perhaps they were in close contact. We've done this before. Last year, we spent a whole year trying to safely reopen schools. This year, we have the benefit of the Return to School roadmap that provides tips for families and for schools. The benefit of the American Rescue Plan, where resources are there to make sure our schools are safe. And then the vaccination efforts that are underway. We know what works. We've seen it work. We just have to follow the guidance from CDC and let our educators and education leaders lead. They know what to do to keep our schools safe. Let's give them the opportunity to do what's right.
Let me get your insight on on the cost of this pandemic on schooling. The New York Times had an analysis they did with Stanford University that showed that in 33 states, 10,000 local public schools lost at least 20% of their kindergartners. First of all, can you assess the gravity of that figure? And secondly, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah, I saw that. And my experience last year in Connecticut as we reopened schools, we saw also that our kindergarten numbers were very low. Half of the number of students that didn't return to school were 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. And what that tells us is that we must double down as educators to reach out to those families and share with them what we're doing to keep their children safe. You know, as I said before, as a parent, nothing is more important to me than the safety of my children. And I think our role now as educators is to communicate that schools are safe places. We know early childhood education is critically important to the success of our students. So having our students come into the classroom where they learn by doing, learning social and emotional skills by doing as 3, 4, 5-year-olds is critically important. It's our job now to help parents feel comfortable with what we're doing to keep their children safe.
One of the ways that parents can feel comfortable is increasing the vaccination rates, as you mentioned, particularly with teachers. What is your position on teachers' mandatory vaccination among teachers in schools?
Sure. Well, we're promoting the Week of Action, where we're really getting the message across the country to get vaccinated when you're eligible. We're having pop-up clinics in schools, and just tomorrow I'm going to be in Kansas with the second gentleman promoting some of the vaccine efforts underway there. And for the educators, I feel strongly that if you're eligible to get vaccinated. Do your part to make sure that we're all safe and that we can reopen schools without interruptions. Again, our students have suffered enough. It's time for all of us to do our part to keep our students and staff safe. Students need to be in the classrooms. That's where they learn best.
Teachers Union Representative Randy Weingarten on NBC suggested that the teachers should get vaccinated. How helpful will that be in that cause?
It's helpful, and quite frankly, I think we recognize as educators across the country that we're going to get farther if we work together, and that's what we're seeing across the country. Educators who have bent over backwards for our students this last year are coming together to say, let's do our part. We know they are lining up to get vaccinated. 90% of the teachers across the country have gotten vaccinated. We're proud of that. We want to keep the efforts going. We want our youth to get vaccinated. Listen, and to those who are making policies that are preventing this, don't be the reason why schools are interrupted, why children can't go to extracurricular activities, why games are canceled. We need to do our part as leaders, like Governor Hutchinson is doing, to make sure that they have access to the decisions that they need to make to get their students safely back in school.
All right, Secretary Cardona, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it. And we'll be right back with a lot more Face the Nation. Stay with us.
I like Face the Nation because they have a broad perspective on different things all over the nation. That's what makes them so unique, is that they just don't look at one particular person's opinion or one particular area. They look at several people's opinions, they look at several areas, and that's what makes Face the Nation very, very unique.
And we'll be right back with Miami-Dade County Public School Superintendent Alberto Carvalho, former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb, and author Amanda Ripley. Stay with us. Welcome back to Face the Nation. The Miami-Dade County Public School System is the 4th largest in the country. School starts there in 2 weeks. Superintendent Alberto Carvalho joins us from Miami. Mr. Superintendent, let me start with the governor. He signed an executive order banning mask mandates in schools. You have about 334,000 students. The governor threatened fund.
334,000 students. Not 34,000 students, but 334,000 students in one county. Can you only begin to fathom what their school system is actually like? That is a lot of children going to school in one area.
To your school system, if there is a mask mandate, how are you weighing the governor's order and the health of your students?
Good morning, John. Number one, we have been a school system that's been guided by science all along. We have navigated this awful pandemic with the expert advice of public health and medical experts, and we're not going to abdicate that position. We'll continue to be a district that's oriented by the expert advice of professionals. It is sad that currently in America we see this rhetorical narrative that's deeply influenced by politics rather than medicine and the wise advice of those who know best what's in the best interest of our students and the professionals who teach them. But look, we are in a privileged position in Miami-Dade as we have time in our hands. Most of the school systems in Florida open tomorrow. We have 2 additional weeks to continue to negotiate, as Secretary Cardona indicated, practicable, reasonable solutions that achieve 2 things. Number one, the appropriate protocols for a safe reopening of schools without compromising the health insurances for our students and our teachers, while simultaneously avoiding these punitive defunding strategies that could be a consequence of a defiance of the executive order or the emergency rules that were followed after the publication of the executive order by the Department of Health and Education.
When do you think you'll have to make the call?
We hope to make the call immediately after our last meeting with the health task force that was convened by the school system over a year ago, which includes individuals like U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, Dr. Eileen Marty. These are experts in field who have advised our school system and will continue to advise Miami-Dade County Public Schools.
The governor says that there is the science, but then there is also the mental health of the children, which he says will be significantly affected by wearing masks. How do you, as someone who has been in education at the level you have, how do you evaluate that assessment about masks and students?
I think it's a fair comment that we should have a balanced set of protocols and safeguards that, number one, ensure the health and well-being from a protective and preventive perspective of our students and employees, side by side, obviously, with the psychological impacts that we hope to protect on the part of students. And I think we are poised to be able to do that with technologies that we have in place, with much improved contact tracing protocols, much improved quarantine rules in place. We believe we can do this without, in a deleterious way, impacting the well-being, psychological, mental well-being of students, but also while protecting the health and well-being in the school environment. Look, I am one who is driven by parental choice. We have 75% of our students enrolled in non-traditional programs in Miami-Dade. We are one of the highest performing urban school systems in the country. And we hope to be able to negotiate a reopening of schools with protocols that, number one, provide protection for our students with masks, while simultaneously avoiding financial consequences, perhaps allowing some degree of parental opt-out provisions.
You, as I understand it, were a part of a school district-wide campaign to talk to households where they were reluctant about coming back to school. You apparently had a pretty good track record. You talked to 30 families, got 23 to agree to come back. Can you tell us what those conversations were like?
Absolutely, John. Look, I think across the country we've been extremely concerned for a long time over the unfinished learning that we observed in every single state associated with the pandemic and the social isolation. We were able to early on, based on early assessments, determine that there were communities of students, particularly English language learners, fragile students who lived in poverty, and students with disabilities who were regressing in a very aggressive way. We identified those students, we called the parents, and the parents, quite frankly, were making decisions driven by 2 factors. One, work circumstances that put them in a position of keeping their kids at home, often older kids supervising younger kids, which was heartbreaking. Secondly, making decisions on the basis of underlying conditions faced by the parents themselves, a relative, or the child. We provided assurance to the parents, and we were able to return to the schoolhouse thousands of students who are absolutely better served in a physical environment with a caring professional in front of them, rather than distance learning through virtual means.
You grew up in Portugal in what you described as pretty dramatic poverty. As you have these conversations and look at your community and what has been lost during the period of COVID, can you give me your assessment of those, the poorest, who have schooling as their route to possible opportunity in America, what the damage has been in that community?
We know, John, that the greatest equalizer in our democratic country is the power of public education, where 90% of our children are educated. And that is, so true, particularly when you reference children in poverty, who make up 75% of our student population in Miami-Dade. And we know that schools offer that ramp of opportunity, that ramp of hope for these kids. That is why all of our efforts are geared towards welcoming every one of our children back into a physical schooling reality come August 23rd, with acceleration towards full potential for all kids, with longer school days, with summer school opportunities that we built this year, serving in excess of 75,000 students, providing additional coaches and interventionists, additional mental health professionals to, quite frankly, provide a holistic approach that will address the unfinished learning that thousands of kids across America have experienced. And that's why I tell you, John, we ought to pay less attention to the loud voices that are often disconnected from reason and focus our attention on students, teachers, and healthy, protective environments, while allowing at the same time the mental and social emotional protections for students and some degree, obviously, of qualified parental choice.
All right, Superintendent Carvalho, thank you so much for being with us. Good luck with your decision. And we'll be right back with former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb. Stay with us. We go now to former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb, who is on the board of Pfizer and is the author of an upcoming book, Uncontrolled Spread: Why COVID-19 Crushed Us and How We Can Defeat the Next Pandemic. Good morning, Dr. Gottlieb. I want to start with a Harris poll.
I want to weigh in before they interview this guy. I've heard him talk before. He's got a head full of knowledge. I don't agree with all his theories. I tend to wonder if a lot of these people isn't marketing their knowledge to the degree that now you have to pay a certain price just to be able to get their advice. And to me, in the middle of a pandemic that we're all facing right now, for doctors to do that, I think is wrong. I'm not saying that they shouldn't make a living, and some of them should make a good living based upon what that they have created in their knowledge and their education, etc., their experiences. But during a pandemic, I feel like that it's inappropriate to put aside the need of the general public versus trying to corner a certain market in prospering for your own financial gain. I tend to wonder, and that's one of the things that I got against this guy, is that he comes off to me like somebody that has more of an interest in fattening his pockets than he does towards the general health of the general population. I may be wrong about that assessment. I may be totally wrong, but that's just what it has come off to me about pertaining to this individual. Let's listen to what he has to say. He may nail it right on the money this time. I don't know. But a lot of these people that are involved in these medical issues right now, not just part of us, but almost all of us, are dealing in areas that we've never dealt with in before. And a lot of times it's just process of elimination of how that they're picking and choosing of what we either should do or shouldn't do, which to me disqualifies them of being considered a professional versus a amateur. And if we got amateurs running the show, we're all in trouble pertaining towards what we should or shouldn't do. We're going to have to use common sense grassroots policies in what's going on. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. Yes, it's biological. It's a chemical, mutated, small, invisible to the eye type germ that is in fact real. We know it's real because we can take pictures of it. We can identify it towards where it's at and what it's doing. But I still put just as much emphasis, if not more, that it's as much of a spiritual entity as it is a biological entity. But let me use this for a quick illustration. We can't see the wind, but we can see the consequences that the wind brings, especially if it's a high amount of wind. If it's 70, 80, 90, 120, 200 mile an hour winds, we can see the consequences in behind the wind. You can't see the wind. You can feel the wind. A lot of times you can hear the wind. You can identify that the wind's there, but you cannot see the wind. Same way with this microscopic germ. You can't see it, but you can see the consequences that it leaves behind. I truly believe that people need to get their hearts and their lives right with Christ. That this is a wake-up call for not just this nation, but for the planet in general. Let's hear what this individual's got to say.
It showed that for the first time in 2 months, Americans think that the pandemic is getting worse rather than getting better. What do you think?
Well, look, it's certainly getting worse. I think you're going to start to see improvements, particularly in the South. There is evidence that the rate of growth in the cases in the South is starting to decline. I think that this week you may see some of the states that have been the outbreak states start to tip over in terms of showing less cases on a daily basis. The rate of expansion of the epidemic is clearly slowing in states like Florida, Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri. But at the same time, we now see the virus spreading to northern states. So cases are building in states like Illinois, Indiana, North Carolina. So this is an epidemic that's going to sweep across the nation at different points in time. I think the northern states are more impervious to the kind of spread we saw in the South, but they're not completely impervious. They have higher vaccination rates, there's been more prior infection, but there's still people who are vulnerable in those states. And the challenge right now is that the infection is going to start to collide with the opening of school. And we have seen that the schools can become sources of community transmission when you're dealing with more transmissible strains. We saw that with B117 in states like Michigan and Massachusetts, and Delta is far more transmissible than B117. So that creates a lot of risk that the spread in the northern states is going to start to collide with the opening of school.
So let's update our thinking here about schools. Your argument is you saw it before even you saw spread in schools. Now there's a more transmissible variant, so you're likely to see more. But Governor DeSantis in Florida said that schools were, quote, a low-risk environment, unquote. Is that wrong?
Well, look, schools aren't inherently safe. They can be made more safe if you take the proper steps, but we can't expect the same outcome that we saw earlier with respect to the schools, where we were largely able to control large outbreaks in the schools with a different set of behaviors. If we're going to change what we do in terms of the mitigation, how we approach the schools, we're going to withdraw masks. We're not going to engage in testing. We're not going to be potting students. We're not going to try to de-densify classes. We can expect a different result, especially with a more transmissible strain. I would enter the school year with a degree of caution and keep in place some of these measures and see how it goes, particularly in areas where there's higher prevalence. I wouldn't be withdrawing these things a priori before the school year gets underway, given the fact that we're dealing with a strain that we don't fully understand. This strain is clearly more transmissible. It's going to be harder to control in a school setting, and it may be more pathogenic. Kids are getting sick with it. We don't know if they're getting sick at a higher rate or we're just infecting a whole lot of kids right now. I can't think of a business right now that would put 30 unvaccinated people in a confined space without masks and keep them there for the whole day. No business would do that responsibly, and yet that's what we're going to be doing in some schools. So I think we need to enter the school year with a degree of humility and prudence.
In keeping that in mind, that humility and prudence, we've talked a great deal about masks. What else should schools be doing to stay on top of this new variant in this time when kids are coming back?
Well, look, with respect to masks, first of all, I'd still be looking at higher quality masks. The Utah governor recently announced that he's making available to every school KN95 masks. Now, they're not mandating masks in Utah, and I think most governors will not be mandating masks, but they're leaving discretion to local officials to implement masks depending on what the local circumstances are, and I think that that's the prudent step that we should be doing. The other thing schools could be doing is operationalizing testing on a regular basis. There's a lot of money, federal money, that's been flowing into states to support testing regimes. Now, a lot of states have had a hard time standing that up, but some have done it quite well. California is going to be testing all students. They've created their own lab. North Carolina, Maryland, Massachusetts have turned to private labs. The Broad is doing a lot of testing for New England states. In New York City, they're doing saliva testing on all students with the help of Mount Sinai, a university, a medical center that I'm affiliated with. So a lot of states are going to be doing testing, but there's still a lot of states that won't be. And I think that that's a very prudent step. The other thing that's very important is podding, keeping kids in defined social pods so that if you do have a case, you don't have to quarantine the entire school. You can track exposure. Right now, the former Surgeon General, my friend Jerome Adams, pointed out that many schools require parents to report if their kids have lice, but don't require to report if their kids that contract COVID. We need to turn that around. We need to still be vigilant heading into this school year. And I think from a standpoint of parents, what they can be doing is checking local prevalence, trying to get high quality masks. If prevalence is high, sending kids to school with masks, even if it's not required, and monitoring symptoms and maybe doing home testing as well, and avoiding unnecessary congregate settings. So if you can avoid activities, after school activities that are done indoors without masks for the time being, try to do that. This is going to be a short-lived wave of infection. It might be our last wave of infection. We have the means to protect ourselves. I think we ought to adhere to them.
Let me ask you now, for parents who are considering getting their kids vaccinated, so those would be over 12 years old, a lot of parents have expressed nervousness in this regard. What would your advice be to a parent who is weighing that decision about getting their child vaccinated?
Well, talking to a pediatrician, vaccination rates are still low among kids. In the 12 to 15 age group, about 30% of children have been vaccinated. In the 16 to 17 age group, about 40%. Now's the time, if you're going to vaccinate your child in advance of the school year, to do it. I think for most parents, you should talk to your doctor, because this isn't just a binary decision between do I vaccinate or don't I vaccinate. There's different strategies that doctors might recommend for different children in terms of how you vaccinate kids. Some doctors I know are telling parents maybe go with one dose for now in lower risk kids. Some doctors are spacing it apart. So pediatricians are making judgment calls in terms of how they approach this. So I think parents who are uncomfortable or reluctant to get their children vaccinated really should afford themselves the opportunity to talk to a physician and see if there's a way to tailor an approach that can address any concerns that they may have.
The FDA is now, or the administration is now moving to your position on boosters, which is that it should be, there should be boosters for the immunocompromised. We also think about nursing homes in this context. Can you tell us, given that there are going to be boosters coming, are they going to come in time for Delta? What's your sense of when somebody who needs a booster might be able to actually get it?
Yeah, so the reporting is that the FDA is going to make a decision on immunocompromised patients within a week, and maybe make a decision on older patients over the age of 65, maybe as early as September. I think, unfortunately, it's going to come a little bit too late for this Delta wave, because by the time you actually make that decision, then CDC issues a recommendation, then you start operationalizing a booster campaign. You're talking about maybe late October at the earliest, if the decision comes in September, that you can start really getting a sizable number of people boosted. It takes time to get that stood up and get people into the doctor's office to get those injections, and it's going to take a couple of weeks for the immunity that the boosters offer to mature. So it's something that we should be considering, I think, right now, particularly with immunocompromised patients, not just people with pre-existing health conditions, but also people in congregate settings like nursing homes, long-term care facilities who are vulnerable.
All right, Dr. Gottlieb, thank you. As always, we'll be back in a moment.
Did you get that? That was a lot of information that he just got through sharing. That in lots of ways, seems logical and practical during the course of where we are right now. But who's to say where we are right now that we're going to be in this same category 6 weeks from now? We don't know what 6 weeks from now holds. That's what's making this whole thing so complex, that is being engineered by Satan, for he's the author of confusion. As we get into this a little deeper, things has a tendency of wanting to change, evolve, mutate into something different. And it almost turns into a guessing game, to the point that it's basically making the experts look like a bunch of unexperts. I'm going to be nice about how I characterize this. Like a bunch of people that don't know what they're talking about. And that's what's making this thing so unstable, not just here in America, but throughout the planet. And as we get further into this, I believe people is going to acknowledge this more so in understanding that this is a live entity. It's growing. It's evolving. It's learning. It's playing tricks with people's health and people's emotions, and it becomes smarter throughout time of being able to evolve around the penicillin to the point that the penicillin could actually become non-effective. And once more, it creates a mind of its own. That's the reason why that I say it is a living entity, other than a living entity with microscopic biological germs, but it is a spiritual living entity that is right now on the loose. It's on the loose. And it talks about this in Revelations, that Satan will rise up in great wrath, because he knoweth his time is short. This entity, this plague, this disease is now rising up. And it's not just rising up in America, but it's rising up throughout the planet. This living entity, I believe, has a great deal to do with the prophecy that it talks about in Revelations towards the entity of evil that is out to kill, steal, and destroy. And in this entity, we're basically talking about the Antichrist. We're talking about Lucifer. We're talking about Satan. We're talking about the false witnesses and the false Christ and the false information that's out there that's causing that much more confusion. That is what we're dealing with. We're not just dealing with a bug. If it was just a bug, something that crawls around on the ground, or something that you can get off of a cat or a dog, don't you think we would have already done eradicated it? Sure we would have. But because this entity is more than a bug, it has the characteristics of being a bug as far as a germ, but it's more than that. I continue to tell people that it's more than just an entity of a bug or a germ. It goes off into the supernatural realm, the spiritual realm. Just like the Bible talks about, Satan will rise up in the last days, for he knoweth his time is short. What we're looking at here pertaining to the plague is not of God. It is of Lucifer. It is of Satan. If you're true to God, listen to this carefully. If you're true to God, if you're following God, if you're a subservient of God, if you've been born again because of God, okay? You have a better chance, just as Christ said, that if you drink of anything, it shall not hurt you. You have a better chance of possibly it not hurting you. But it also may be your time to go. And if it be that case, if God is allowing for this to work towards taking out various people, towards regaining the kingdom structure, if it's time for you to go, regardless whether it comes in the form of a virus or a car accident or a bullet or whatever, really and truly, by you fighting up against this opportunity of leaving this world and going to the hereafter world, you're actually fighting up against God. And I don't know if anybody can understand that or not. I know it sounds hypocritical. It probably sounds bittersweet. It sounds like an oxymoron. But if you'll put that with the teachings of Christ that said to weep and to lament whenever they come into the world and to rejoice whenever they leave the world, if you'll put all of that into the same format towards the mind of Christ, the mind of the Lord, the mind of God, then you'll understand why God has allowed for this entity to basically get out of control, or this entity to manifest itself the way that it's manifesting itself. Once more, it's difficult to put in words how God has allowed for us to be a free mortal agent, to make our own decisions of life and death, and to make our own decisions towards whether or not we wanted to serve God or serve this dark entity. And there's many different ways that you can serve this dark entity. People think, well, to serve the dark entity, you have to give up your faith in Christ and no longer go to church and become a non-believer. No. You can put on an act of going to church. You can put on an act of being a believer. But at the same time, you know that your heart is not right, and you know that there are certain obstacles in your life that you've actually turned into various religious sources of you actually worshiping. You can worship your automobile. You can worship your wife. You can worship your husband. You can worship your kids. You can worship your Corvettes and your cars. You can worship money. You can worship different things in this world. Oh, you can go to church and you can put on a big act. Once more, we're talking about actors. We're talking about pretenders. You can go to church and put on a big act. But in reality, only you know where your heart is, and only you know if the things that you're doing is an act, or if the things that you're doing is actually 100% unique, authentic, and nobody can argue the fact of that to the point that you're willing to even sacrifice your own life, if necessary, the same as Christ was willing to sacrifice his for us. For what greater love, the Bible teaches us, what greater love had there than a person or a brother or a sister in the Lord who is willing to lay down their own lives? There is no greater love than this. And even though you may like your Cadillac, even though you may like your house, that's going to be the defining moment in separating the goats from the sheep. That's going to be the defining moment in separating the wheat from the tares, of understanding that you're willing to lay down your life above and beyond your Cadillac, your car, your job, your wife, your children. You're willing to put God first in who you want to be a subservient to. This is a test for all of us. And it's not just a test in a physical form. That's just part of it. That's just part of what we're going through. The other part is our faith and our belief in God, and what type of relationship that you have with God. Who you are and what you are can defy these very moments in going through these struggles like we're going through right now, of just exactly trying the iron or the metal of the trueness of whether or not it's true metal, true iron, or whether or not it just looks like a good piece of metal. You know, a good sword has been tempered again and again and again. And there's a reason why that this sword is tempered. It's tempered that way whenever it takes a big blow, it doesn't just break in half, but it actually bends to the blow. That's really how we are as human mortals down here upon to the earth. We have to become tempered to the point that we can let certain things roll off our back. We can adapt. We can learn to adjust. We can learn to evolve, even as this disease evolves towards staying in front of it rather than allowing for it to consume us. But at the same time, keeping our faith in Christ. Is it a tight line to walk? In a way. In a way. But once more, only you know the authenticity of the realness of whether or not you claim that you got what you got, or whether or not you really do got what you claim that you got. A lot of people's been going to church all their lives. And it's not until the very last dying day, whenever they're dying on their deathbed, whenever they actually submit fully of being a subservient unto God, is whenever they realize that they haven't been fully given it all to God. It's only until their last dying breath is whenever they make a full submission or confession to God towards God. Here I am. Take me as I am. And because of His grace, because of His love, because of the things that the Heavenly Father taught the begotten pertaining to Christ, He stands true to His word. And He always will, because the Bible says that even though heaven and earth may pass, His words will not pass. His promises will not pass. His covenants will not pass. His forecasts or prophecies will not pass. All these things will be fulfilled in the last days. For all will give an account one day, including myself, at the foot of the cross. Thanks again for listening. Good luck to all of us. And we want to be sure and thank this particular broadcast in Facing the Nation. I wish that one day we would have a news entity that would be called Face the Planet, or Face the continents on the planet. And basically all we talked about was various things that was happening all over the world that had similar characteristics of what's going on in America versus what's going on in India versus what's going on in Australia. And in a way, that's what the international news does do. It brings everything into perspective. And of course, right now, the main thing that we all have in common, regrettably, is the disease. And also, the main thing that we all have in common that a lot of people has been in denial of is global warming pertaining to extreme weather patterns that is falling all over the planet. Right now, we're dealing with fires out west like we've never experienced before. But these fires out west are not just happening here in America. They're also happening in other parts of the planet, all over the planet. And if we didn't have good satellite communications towards understanding what goes on the other side of the planet, just like understanding what goes on here, we wouldn't be able to make any type of comparisons on a global scale in these regards. So I want to thank personally this particular broadcast, because I've always found it to be very, very interesting in looking at various concepts, not just in one part of the country, but in all parts of the country. Different doctors, different politicians, different scientists, all coming together and unifying and bringing forth this program that possibly could and can be extremely educational to various people all over the world. We want to say thank you again. God bless you. God bless America. And good luck to each and every one of us as we go forth in our struggles towards our endeavors. Shalom is how we end our program, wishing for everyone a peace of mind and a peaceful planet. Thank you.